All right, welcome back everybody to Form Check Friday on Calgary Barbell. What we do here is we have you email in your lifts, and me, a coach of many years in powerlifting, will give you some advice. We can chat programming, technique, a little bit about maybe some psychology when it comes to the lifts or how to progress them. In any case, I'm here to try to give some coaching to the community. If you're interested in submitting, you can head to calgarybarbell.com and there are some submission instructions there. Without any further ado, let's get to our first, not contestant, our first submission. All right, up first here is Ashley. Ashley's doing 205 for 3. And didn't really give me a whole lot of context, just kind of said leaking power everywhere. So let's take a look at the lift and see what we can work on here. So right off the hop, it looks like what we're trying to do with our brace is we're trying to get this extension, right? I think it's a really common issue with a lot of people's deadlifts is we have this idea that the proper position, we'll put that in air quotes, is one where we're really extended, right? I think a lot of people, especially, Gen Pop lifters who are or aren't competitive power lifters. I don't know if Ashley told me whether she's doing powerlifting specifically, but we end up kind of being afraid of any sort of back flexion, right? Now, if we watch this lift here, we get into honestly what I would consider a better position for the back, right? A stronger position for the back. There is maybe a tiny little bit of flexion here, right? But you can see we're still pretty much straight as an arrow. Now, the issue I think with Ashley's deadlift is how we're creating that tension off of the floor. If we can find this braced position with the hips lower, we're going to be doing a lot better job of producing force. So what I would recommend for Ashley here, and it's tough to tell a little bit because we're just a side angle. A lot of times, if we can see the deadlift from multiple angles, we can get a better idea what's going on. But I think probably looks like Ashley's got pretty long legs. So in a lot of cases with longer legged lifters, we need to widen things up a little bit. Now, this could go as far as trying some sumo deadlifts. You might find those pretty comfortable. You might find those work pretty well for you. Let's watch through the rest of the reps and the lockouts and everything while I'm chatting here. But at least what I would do is probably work on a slightly wider stance with your conventional. Now, the other big thing I'm seeing here is that we're doing touch and go reps, right? We're coming down, boom. See how we're not going to a dead stop? Now, what this does is it doesn't really train this part of the lift, right? Where we're breaking the bar from the floor at a dead stop. And by utilizing that touch and go and getting that like tapping and bouncing, we kind of cut out the bottom of the range of motion here. So we're not getting as much training effect for that. You do 5 reps, you're getting 1 rep where you're breaking it from a dead stop off the floor. In this case, 3 reps, 1 rep where you're breaking it from a dead stop off the floor. So it's hard to get better at that start position. It's hard to get better at creating that tension, creating a good position off the floor. So what I would recommend for Ashley, number 1, this position's great. Don't worry about trying to like extend your back or arch your back. I want you to think about pulling your ribs down on top of your abs to create a lot of tension out into this belt. And I want you to try to incorporate your lats into your brace. Right? So thinking about pulling the shoulder blades down a little bit, creating some tension through your lats. And I want you to be a little bit more patient off the floor. I want you to think about trying to find the feeling of doing a leg press and pushing the bar off of the floor. I want you to actively keep the knees forward as you're doing this, right? That way we're preventing the hips from coming up behind you, which is one of the first things that happens here, right? Whoop. So again, this trunk position here is great. The position we end up in is great. However, our hips are a lot higher, our knees are a lot further back. And I think, again, in order to get to a point where we can create this tension and not be in this, more stiff-legged deadlift position, we're probably going to want to widen some things up. And what I mean by that is taking your stance, widening it out a little bit. Likely that means taking your grip and widening it out a little bit as well. And I would emphasize even the start position and pulling the bar from a dead stop every single rep. If you are doing a secondary deadlift variation throughout the weeks, I would recommend a paused deadlift where you're breaking the bar, you know, this far off the floor, you're pausing, and then you're, you know, continuing with the rest of the lift. It's going to feel like you're starting the lift 2 times. Now that will help kind of work in the opposite way that I was talking about, the touch and go reps. Also, with any of your competition deadlifts or your normal deadlifts, I would always pull from a dead stop off the floor. Probably that's going to feel bad at first, right? It's going to take some weight off the bar, which is okay. You know, it hurts the ego a little bit, but it's probably a good thing in the long run, and will allow you to get a lot more consistent with that first rep, because every rep will be the same. We won't have the advantage of kind of, you know, tapping it or bouncing it off the floor. So hopefully that helps, Ashley, and best of luck with your deadlift. And now we are going to move on to Prashant doing more deadlifting. All right, so like I said, Prashant is deadlifting. We got a decent bit of deadlifting this week. People just want to send me deadlifts, maybe because that is one of the lifts I've been better at throughout my lifting career. But we're taking a look at a 222.5 kilo top single. Prashant loses momentum below the knee and finds he slows down quite a bit, missing at lockout sometimes, and finding the bar getting stuck on his thighs. So let's take one more little look-see through here, shall we? So ironically, I think I'm going to give some similar advice to Prashant here. And in this, again, I think we can widen up. Right? I think what's happening here is you're a bigger guy, you got a bunch of muscle, you got big quads, your quads are running into your trunk, and we're losing a little bit much position here. The other thing is with your head pulled back like this, we're creating a lot of tension and you know, a pretty neutral position in the upper back, but I think it's at the expense of this lower back position, right? So the back into the pelvis, and the pelvis is getting kind of tucked in underneath, which almost always creates this very kind of pronounced sticking point at lockout, right? So by widening up a little bit, I think it's going to allow you the room to get your pelvis tilted the other way, right? Right now, the pelvis is kind of tilted in underneath you. I would have you try to extend your low back a little bit to get that pelvis tilted the opposite way. And I would bring your head down this way so that your head is more in line with your trunk. That way, if the upper back rounds a little bit, we see a little bit of rounding in this upper back here, that's fine. That's going to free up a little bit more extension ability for the low back and for the hips. And I think if we can make that swap, we're going to end up with a lot smoother deadlift. Now, the other thing I'm noticing here is as we get to the knees, we're doing a pretty common thing, and that is to like push your knees forwards under the bar. A lot of times when people lose back position, they end up doing this to try to, you know, sort of compensate. They get the torso more upright, so it's easier to kind of uncurl and make up for that lost extension in the back. But you'll see here, the knees lock out after the hips, right? Hips lock and then knees lock. So what I would say is, you know, allow your knees to, you know, kind of stay where they are. Don't worry about trying to wedge them in under the bar. And you can probably lock your knees even a little bit earlier, right? Keep those quads going. Right now, we're shifting a lot of load to the heels as we get towards the lockout. I think we need to keep a little more even pressure through the feet as we press. Try not to let ourselves kind of pull back with it, because that's when we're going to be, wedging the knees underneath, trying to kind of, you know, leverage it up a little bit. Whereas if we can just hold that better position, that might help a fair bit. Now, the other thing I'm noticing as I'm seeing the lockout here, belt is quite tight. I think sometimes we maybe lean on that belt a little too much to, you know, just be tight and create pressure. Whereas if we can, you know, wear the belt maybe one hole looser or something like that, we can better fill the belt out while not having it restrict our positions. Because a lot of times when we have that really, really tight belt, it feels like, A, we're already tight, so we don't need to breathe into it. We don't need to do any of the like active bracing stuff. And B, there's so much feedback from that really tight belt that we can struggle sometimes to know where we are in our position and be able to get that little bit of extension or feel where that little bit of extension in the low back is. If you like this kind of content and maybe your training could use a bit of a boost, you could use some guidance with your programming or with your technique, you can head to calgarybarbell.com and check out the Calgary Barbell Training app. Now, with the app, you get access to all the programming, you get a slick UI to manage your training, and you also get access to the Discord where myself and Taylor and Danny, two of the other phenomenal world-class Calgary Barbell coaches, do weekly check-ins and form checks for all of our lifters every week. So if that sounds like something you'd like, head to calgarybarbell.com and check it out. Let's get to Kevin's bench press next. All right, so this is Kevin on the bench press. This is 215 for a single at 9, and then a 225 fail. So he said his last meet, he missed his second and third attempt because they felt way too heavy. He didn't feel comfortable pausing because he's never felt the weight. Sounds like leg drive, he said, is a big issue. He mentioned that a couple times in the email. He's wondering about his shoulder position, struggling a little bit with these benches, which I think is fair. And he said when weights get heavier, he pushes the weight rather than pushing himself into the bench. So there's a couple things here. Number one, I think we're probably just flying a little too close to the sun. And what I mean by that is, like, in your email, you mentioned, you hit the 215 and it moved okay. So you figured, what do we have to lose? Let's load 225. And I think you said it was about 2 months after your last meet. So to me, that sounds like maybe we don't have a fantastic plan in terms of what we're doing with training, right? Like if we're feeling this need to max out and like see if we've got it, either we are, kind of coming up with our training on the fly, or, we're going off of program and deciding to max out. In either case, I think you're probably doing yourself a bit of a disservice. It sounds like, again, through this email, you mentioned that you'd never felt XYZ weight, or you didn't pause it because you've never felt that weight. And unfortunately, on some level, that is just powerlifting, right? Like, you are going to get out onto the platform and touch weights that you have never touched before. The idea is that training prepares you for those weights, not by you lifting those weights in training, but by you lifting sub-maximally with really good, efficient technique and planning when you're going to, push really hard and do singles up to like an 8 or a 9 RPE, but always with the intent of, we're going to pause this, because if we can't pause it in powerlifting, there's kind of no point in doing it, right? Like, you're a competing powerlifter, so you're going to be pausing in competition. I mean, a touch and go PR is great, but a paused PR is much better. So I think on some level we need to try to reframe how we're training. Maybe, grab yourself a program. I plugged the app already, but there's a free 16-week program at calgarybarbell.com too. You just put your email address in, we send it to you. There's no strings attached. We might send you a couple emails afterwards and be like, hey, how's it going? But that is a great way to get a start. I know a lot of lifters have used that, and I think getting a handle on what it feels like to prepare for a competition, and have programming that scales intelligently, learning to trust your programming. You might be doing programming, but if you're going off your program, that tells me that there's maybe not a whole lot of trust in what you're doing, right? This need for lifters to, like, I need to feel the weight so that I'm confident, right? This idea that, what usually ends up as overshooting is necessary because we need to build the confidence to be able to, know what the heavyweights feel like and stuff. I don't really buy it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that it benefits most lifters. I think that in most cases it is because we, like I said, either don't trust the training is going to get us there, or I don't know. or we think that that's the only way that we can adequately prepare, which again, you know, I'm telling you is not the case, right? If you want to bench 225, my recommendation is get to the point where you can bench, you know, 210 to 215 really well, semi-regularly, with good pauses and good technique and a relatively good bar speed. Because if you can do that, we can reliably estimate that you can bench 225 and you can go to a meet and do it. And like, trust me, I've done it. A lot of lifters have done it. You know, I coach lifters on the daily, and this kind of, you know, being able to estimate, staying in what we call the pocket, and doing our training at a submaximal place is absolutely essential if we want to have success in powerlifting, especially continued success, long-term success. Anyways, you came here for technique advice. Let's take a look at the technique. It is sometimes a little bit hard to tell with, you know, absolute top end lifts, but sometimes we also get a little bit extra insight from those. So first off, yeah, man, these benches are rough. They're super narrow, I think, for most people. So being able to get yourself in a good position and hold it without feeling like you're kind of falling off the bench, you know, is tough, is absolutely tough. I think we do a really good job on the unrack. We pull the bar out to a good spot. If we're struggling with leg drive, I might just play around with your foot position, right? Try putting your feet out here more, you know, kind of more placed like this to get more of a straight back leg drive. Try pulling your feet more back in underneath you. Probably the biggest reason people struggle with leg drive is foot position, right? Because leg drive isn't super complicated. There's kind of two ways to do it. One way where we apply consistent pressure throughout, like your butt is hovering, just barely touching the pad, and we have like 100% leg drive from unrack to re-rack. That's like style one. Style two is we relax a little bit during the sort of bottom inch or two of the range of motion as the bar touches the chest, and we deliver a bit of a jolt of leg drive to help us get the bar started off the chest. That usually coincides with a heavier touch bench press, where we're not necessarily, you know, just touching the t-shirt. We're allowing the bar to sink a little bit. So that's leg drive. If we're not getting the leg drive, a lot of times it's more of a positional thing. We need to play around with our feet, where we're setting them, how we're pushing, right? We want to be pushing back. The whole idea of leg drive is that we're pushing back and it's reinforcing this arch, right? If we're thinking, you know, back this way, shoulders back and under, arch this way, it's the recycling arrows. They're going this way, right? That's what we're doing. That's leg drive. A lot of people, I think, also maybe hope or think that leg drive will do a lot more for them than it does, right? It's not a like magical cure-all thing. I think a lot of really good benchers will bench not that much less feet up, depending on, you know, how much arch they're getting and stuff. But yeah, so in terms of the shoulder position, I think also quite good. One thing I am seeing is that we might want to actually narrow our grip a little bit, and or we're over tucking, right? If we were to look at this from like your foot angle, I think what we'd see is, if your hands are here, we have this kind of angle in the forearms, right? And then into the body. And ideally we'd have a little more of a straight up and down angle. So two things we can do, right? One, we can learn to flare the elbows a little more throughout the lift. Instead of cranking down like this, we're allowing the elbows to be out here. Or if we're stronger in here, we bring the grip in so that, again, that forearm is more straight up and down, right? So we either move this point, the elbow, out here, or we move this point, the hand, in here. Either way, we end up with a more straight up and down elbow, or sorry, forearm position. That's what I would look for in terms of that. Okay, we got one more deadlift, and then I have a little surprise at the end of this episode. Something we've never done on Form Check Friday. There's some brand new stuff for you. Let's get to Mora's deadlift first, though. Bow. All right, this is Mora. deadlifts 160 for triple, RP 6 to 7. He said he finds it difficult to get into a good start position. Has been lifting for a few years and is enjoying this, you know, he called it the frog stance deadlift, right? It's like kind of a mid stance deadlift, right? If this is the bar, you know, sumo, I think people are thinking is out here stance wise, frog sumo in here, conventional in here, right? So a little bit of a moderate sumo stance. Now, I think the thing that I'm looking at here in terms of your start position and your brace is I would probably try to get a little more extension. Right now, it looks like all of our setup, we're kind of just rocking back on heels, right? Everything's coming back like this. And what I'd like to see, especially with the shoulders, is a little more down, right? I'd like to see these shoulder blades pulled down more into the brace so that we can get a little more of a neutral back position, especially as the set wears on. Our hips end up staying quite high and are really far back. Also, our knees are pretty far back. I think, you know, I think some people who will coach to, like, imagine there's this glass wall coming up from the bar and you're not allowed to let your knees go past it. I don't necessarily agree with that, or at least I won't apply that to every lifter. I think in a lot of cases, there's a really good case to be made for the knees traveling forwards in the setup, for the knees tracking a little bit more forwards. And that case is that we can get the hips lower, we can get a little more quad in it, and especially with a more moderate stance like we've got, I think letting those knees come more forward is going to allow you to, right? Like on this rep, we kind of just pull everything back. And I want you to try and pull back and down, right? Like knees forward, get a little bit of extension, pull those shoulder blades down. Even, dare I say it, in the year of our Lord 2025, chest out or chest up. Crazy Q, I know, okay boomer. But I think in this case, yeah, a little bit of trying to like get that chest up, get a little extension. That I think is probably the biggest thing that I would work on. Again, maybe looking at a belt that's a little on the tight side, right? Might want to loosen that up one again, just to give you a little more proprioception, right? A little more ability to feel where your body is in space. Sometimes super tight belt limits our ability to get that feedback to know where we are positionally. So I hope that helps, Mora. Now, like I said, we have a grand surprise, and that is we're gonna start doing a little segment called the good lifts of the week, because we get people who send in their training footage, and you know, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's great, that's good, don't change anything. But in some cases that just means those people either, you know, get nothing back from us, or you know, are just never featured, or are wondering, you know. So I think in some cases, a little bit of positive reinforcement goes a long ways. And sometimes just being like, hey, man, you're doing good, keep it up, is good feedback. So we got 2 selected today for the good lifts of the week. First one comes from Oliver here, and he's pulling 280 for a single. Oliver said he had some issues with, you know, the dynamics of his initial slack pull and some of that kind of stuff. But honestly, man, you're doing such a freaking great job. You're pulling 280. I really don't think there's much I would change here. I think if you continue to practice and be mindful and work on the things that you mentioned that you're already aware of in your training, and honestly, just be confident, man. Like, your pull is really great. Like, this is clearly, you know, pretty close to a maximal lift, top end lift, you know, and we lose a tiny little bit of position, but again, you're able to get it fully locked out despite that. So great lift. Don't need to change much. Just honestly keep working on her. Our next one comes from Marciel, unsure, and he's doing some squats. This is 155 for 3, and mentioned that he's having a hard time getting his squat going and making progress. And I don't think it's down to technique here, my friend. I think more or less we're doing a great job. You know, we lose a little bit of upper back position. We could play around with bar position. Think about moving bar position down a little bit. But overall, this is super, super solid stuff. Like, you are a good squatter. I think probably some programming adjustments, maybe a little bit more frequency, you know, try a new program, or, you know, look at getting a coach or something like that might help go a long ways. If you're not, I'm not trying to tell you to ditch your coach or anything, but yeah, I really do think that your technique is quite good here and you're doing a good job of squatting. So I don't think that what you're feeling is a lack of technique. I think you're doing a great job. So good lift. And that is Form Check Friday. Again, if you want to submit, head to calgarybarbell.com. There's a submission form there you can fill out, attach a video, fire it over, and maybe you will be here next time. Bye, y'all.